Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 149th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 555th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, December 5th, 2019. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Wednesday night at a time when Indiana wasn't even playing, because this week's banner moment isn't about Indiana per se. It's more about the other teams in the college basketball universe that Indiana will be competing against this season. And here's the realization I had about these other teams on Wednesday night, one night after Duke, fresh off its home defeat at the hands of Stephen F. Austin, pounded preseason number 1 Michigan State in East Lansing, and around the time that a 3-loss Purdue team was shellacking supposed top 5 Virginia, and a balanced but not outrageously talented Ohio State team was destroying supposed top 10 North Carolina. The realization was there are a whole lot of good teams out there, but are there actually any great ones? And if the answer to that question is no, then how far is this Indiana team really from not just being an NCAA tournament team, but potentially one that could actually make some noise in a wide open field if they get in? Now, I know what you're saying. Let's actually play a game away from Assembly Hall before we start making plans for March. And don't forget that there are toddlers out there who have never even seen Indiana in an NCAA tournament, and fair enough. But after 320 minutes of basketball, during which our competition-adjusted computer rankings have steadily risen into the top 25, I think it's safe to say that, at a minimum, we have a good team. And here's something important to remember. It's so easy when you hyper-focus on IU to see our weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But it's easy to forget that those weaknesses and vulnerabilities don't exist in a vacuum. Another team still has to be good enough to take advantage of them. So when you step back and look at everyone else in the conference and around the country, especially the so-called elite teams, suddenly we don't look all that far behind. And if the college hoops landscape really is as wide open this year as it appears to be, well, then why not us? No, we're almost surely not good enough this year to hang a banner, but it sure is starting to seem more and more feasible that we'll be ready to compete at a higher level than previously thought, in part because the next level may not be as far above us as anticipated. And with so much of this roster projected back next season, plus another solid yet still incomplete recruiting class on the way, Archie Miller does seem to have this IU program on a slow but steady path toward being really good again, which hopefully is a stepping stone toward the return to greatness that we all pine for. But in the meantime, in this new era of college basketball, really good may be good enough to believe you have a team capable of doing something special. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Leonard Hamilton of Girls U Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and the world's most fun-loving bracketologist.
Well, it's been a fun week, Jared. Let me tell you, this is fun. This kind of game is fun. This was fun. All right, well, this was fun.
Andy, let's have some fun. What's your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
I assume that you mentioned Leonard Hamilton because I continue to not really show my age like Leonard Hamilton, who I believe posted one of those like 10-year apart pictures and basically looked exactly the same online, which was fantastic. You know, when you step back and look at the game, it was an exciting one to talk about in the immediate aftermath. And I think I found myself in some cases, I feel like we change our opinions a lot after the, immediacy of the game. But I think that even looking at this one, I walk away even more impressed when you go back and you look at some of the circumstances around it and continue to just go back to the fact that IU was playing a really short rotation for the majority of the second half, and in a tough physical game felt like where a relatively inexperienced team that wasn't getting a lot out of some of their veterans, guys like Al and Duran, Al was a big part of the game, but didn't have one of his better games. Duran's a guy that we've talked about so much, really expecting him to be a big part of the team. And so some of the guys that you would have expected to get performances out of and need performances out of in a game like this, you didn't have, but you had Devonte play so well. Justin Smith continued growth. Trace being better than anybody anticipated so far. Armaan stepping up in big moments. Damezi stepping up in big moments. And it seems remarkable to kind of look at that game and the way that it was trending for a little while and look at the guys who helped pull them out of what was a game that I think most people would argue last year's team would have found a way to lose. Maybe you'd argue last year's team never would have been ahead by that much in the first place, but it's exciting. And while, yes, we don't know what a trip to the Kohl Center holds and all the things that are yet to come on the season, but I think it's exciting to look at what this team did in key moments in a tough game. They were certainly bolstered by the crowd, but just continue to be really impressed with how they played in that game and think that it hopefully leads to big things in the future. And the schedule, as we talked about, kind of building up to all this. So it passed the test of getting through November undefeated, passed the first test with a big opponent. Now it's time to play away from home for the first time for the next 2 games against some challenging competition as well. And see if this team can rise to that occasion. But I think the signs are positive for where this goes. And if everybody ever gets healthy, if that can ever happen, what this team could really look like at full strength is a good thing to think about.
And to my right,
he remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
I have a mad crush on Coach Roberts.
Coach, what's on your mind?
Man, Coach Roberts can get after people on the sideline. That just made my day. Besides the great win, besides seeing Assembly Hall, the crowd going crazy, Coach Roberts just holding court on the sidelines. This is great to see. We got to be happy. What a great performance on Tuesday night by the Indiana Hoosiers. And a couple things really stood out in that game. One, the collective team defense for the entirety of the game. There was a stretch to start the second half where Florida State made some adjustments, went to a smaller lineup and really spaced the floor. And Indiana gave up some quick threes, but they found it again. And that leads me to the second point is I thought Indiana handled adversity really well, from not having Rob at the very start to having some runs made against Indiana once they established the lead. And that was really good to see a somewhat relatively inexperienced team be able to handle that in front of national television in their first big crowd. And, going into the Wisconsin, everyone, I got tired of hearing on the show, oh, Indiana hasn't played anybody. This is their first time. Well, Indiana's just played all 7.
Did they mention that?
Yeah, 7 of their teams in a row, which is, out of the ordinary. But most teams play 5, 6, or 7 of those types of teams. Louisville plays 8 this year if you look at Louisville's schedule, and no one says that about Louisville. And so there's another first going on the road, and it makes you nervous as a fan. But if they can handle adversity within the game, it leads you to believe that they're going to be able to handle some adversity as we go on the road and face other types of adversity. So that's nice. And then the big mark for me is 20 wins. I think 20 wins puts Indiana in the tournament, and we might have higher expectations now after seeing them play and thinking that we're a lot better than what we thought in the preseason. But 20 is that magical mark. Indiana has to go 12-11 the rest of the way to get to 20. And I think that should be easily achieved. So I'm really pleased with the direction of what's going on. I put together little clips of Damezi playing outstanding defense. And if he grows defensively, that is just a huge plus for this Indiana basketball team. And Armaan, we thought would be ready in January. He's really ready at the 1st of December to play major minutes. Those two guys really stood out. That didn't get a lot of box score coverage from the game Thursday night. Or Tuesday night. It's just really great because I thought we were behind the 8 ball without Rob against that pressure. And boy, everyone stepped up, next man up, and got the job done.
Those clips that you mentioned, part of your regular Coach's Corner features that you've been doing, those are normally just inside of our private community at assemblycall.com/community. You can learn more about. But I actually posted that one publicly on Twitter. So if you go to our Twitter page at Assembly Call, you'll see that video Coach did running down Damezi's defensive improvement, some great hustle plays by Armaan, and then just kind of gawking at Devonte's incredible shooting, which was, fun to relive. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about this week. Big game on Saturday. We're going to talk about keys to victory over Wisconsin. We'll make some Big Ten predictions, and then we got a whole bunch of mailbag questions. They're all good, so we're going to get to all of them All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about tickets. You have a lot of options when it comes to where you get your sports tickets, and this is not an industry that is known for its growth, innovation, and customer friendliness. But with millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee, SeatGeek proves that there's a better way. They built the fastest way to find tickets so you can stop searching for the perfect seat and instead start enjoying it, like thousands upon thousands did at Assembly Hall on Tuesday night. Just look at the App Store. SeatGeek has over 50,000 5-star reviews, and the reason is because they deliver a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10 with a color-coded system to show the value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. Then they display the tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see right where they are. And every purchase is fully guaranteed so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. I find it to be the fastest, easiest way to find tickets. So whenever I need tickets, whether it's for a concert, a sporting event, whatever, SeatGeek is what I use. I just got a text from someone, a super IU fan, who said he has 5th row seats, 5 rows behind the bench for the Indiana game at Wisconsin. If you're anywhere in the area, get up there. And if you want tickets to that game, any other IU game, go to SeatGeek to find them. And when you do that,
can a brother get some coupons?
Yes, you can. SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. Okay, gentlemen. So IU Wisconsin this week. It's at Wisconsin. Quick pop quiz. Does anybody remember what year Indiana last won a game at Wisconsin?
No.
Anybody?
I know this, one, because you talked about it on podcast on the rink, and two, because it's in the run sheet. So I mean,
oh, well, that's true. Coach, were you alive the last time Indiana won at Wisconsin?
Yeah, I was.
I was 16.
I was
a long time ago.
I was 31. Yeah,
I
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Needless to say,
long time ago.
It's been a while, but this does kind of feel like the best chance that Indiana has had going into it in terms of what Wisconsin's bringing to the table. Because they are, I think, 60th in KenPom. They've really struggled. They're 4-4. Now, they've won all 4 of their home games, but every time they've played away from home, they've lost. Obviously, we're playing them at Wisconsin, so, that's obviously worth noting. But I want to talk real quick about keys to the game and get your guys' thoughts on these. There's 3 that, to me, are really clear. One is guarding the three-point line. Wisconsin's only shooting 29.7% from deep, but they put up a lot of attempts. 44% of their field goal attempts are threes, and they have shooters with proven track records who are underperforming, and they're shooting better at home. In fact, in the win over Marquette, they went 11 for 23. So Indiana has to guard the three-point line. We know at times that's been a vulnerability in certain games, although overall Indiana's done a good job of guarding the three-point line. That's big. Crashing the offensive glass is another one. This is strength on strength. They're really good at not letting teams get offensive rebounds. It's been a huge part for Indiana. And one thing to remember here is, Wisconsin is 348th in the country in transition possessions. They're not a team that really gets out and runs, so I think Indiana can really crash the glass. Obviously, they still have to pay attention to transition defense, but Wisconsin, not a team wired to take advantage of that as much as some other teams might be. And then the other one, Andy, for me, that is really big, and it's a guy that you mentioned, I think if Indiana's going to win, Al Durham has to have a big bounce back. I think we're going to have to make some outside shots, and I think he's a big part of that. I think he's going to have to play solid defense against their guards, who are, I think are probably primed to bounce back a little bit. And I think he's got to be the guy that pushes it in transition to get easy opportunities before their defense sets up. One other thing to keep in mind, Devonte Green has really struggled versus Wisconsin in his career. And I don't know if that's just random or if it's a style of play thing, but he's played 4 games against them. He's totaled 13 points, has a couple of goose eggs, and has one turnover every 5 minutes of game time. So, take that for what it's worth. It's not the biggest sample size. And then Armaan Franklin's a freshman. So I think your role players are going to step up more often at home as they did against Florida State. On the road, I think you got to count on your main guys and your upperclassmen. And to me, Al Durham is going to be huge in this game if Indiana's going to win. So to me, those are the 3 biggest keys. Do you agree, disagree with those, and do you have any others that jump out for you?
I think those are 3 good ones. The 3-point shooting is an interesting one simply because, as you said, they've not shot the ball well from 3 at all. Bart brought that up when he was talking to you and Alex this week. Right now, they're under 30% from 3. But if you do look down, some of the guys that you mentioned, Kobe King has shown the ability to shoot from 3. in the past. Actually, no, he's the one who hasn't. Sorry, I was looking at everybody else. Aleem Ford has been hot at times. Demetric Trice has shot, he was over 40% as a freshman, over 41% as a freshman. Now, he hasn't gotten there since then, but was 39% last year. He's 30 this year. Davison's shooting about 5 percentage points lower than what he has. I think Pritzel's a bit lower as well. And it's one of those things where we've seen teams like that get hot at IU by, you see a few go in the basket, you give a few easy shots early, and things kind of go from there. Now, part of that, I think, is due to not having a gravitational guy like Ethan Happ, where the defense last year was forced to make decisions about whether they were going to double him, and that really put teams into rotation. They don't have that this year. Nate Reavers hasn't played as well as everyone had hoped that he would. You guys discussed that on the show as well, just in terms of his ability to really post up and get deep position and make defenses react to him in the same way that Happ is. So I think there's a little bit of, yes, there's room for them to go back to shooting the way that they've shown in the past. But outside of that, I think some of the quality of the shots that they've gotten in the past is a lot different than what they're getting today. So maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
It's a good point.
And the other one is really around the free throw component. This will most certainly sound like a rant against officiating, and probably to a certain extent it is, based on the history that we've seen. But for Archie talking about after the game, this team is built around one thing it can do really well, which is get fouled. And Wisconsin is continues to be a team that defensively doesn't put people on the line. They're 25th in defensive free throw rate. So something's got to give there, in the same way that you mentioned the glass being a strength on strength type matchup. So that will be another one to watch. To think that IU is going to get into the 30s is a stretch by any means, but I think if you can get into the low to mid 20s, that's probably a good sign, given the pace that Wisconsin wants to play at and everything that you'll have there. So I do think from a physical standpoint, when you talk about Al, I think he matches up a bit better with the guys that Wisconsin has. We've talked about him, how he deals with contact. Other than the occasional Davison flop, I don't know how much contact he'll be receiving in that game. So
I don't know how much contact there are on most Davison flops, actually. So that's
a fair point. Roughly the same amount as that foul that Justin Smith got called for.
that awful flagrant foul that he got called for. That was ridiculous.
He's a menace.
Yeah, Coach, keys to you for this game.
Andy's right. When what type of threes are they getting? And we haven't watched Wisconsin, haven't watched any film on Wisconsin. Are they getting open threes? Because last year you had to double Happ, and he was such a good passer at times too. They were getting some open looks. The thing that worries me is they're probably better shooters at home. They've struggled to win at neutral and on the road so far, but they did beat Marquette at home with some good shooting. That's going to be a concern. But you don't have to – you can make a choice not to double down low and man up. I think that's an important – just the most important point going into Saturday. And I think then how is Wisconsin going to guard? Listen to your podcast on the brink. They're going to struggle with guarding big lineups in the Big Ten, it was mentioned. And so are they going to be able to stop the inside game, both on the glass, as you have said, and can they keep up their strength of defensive rebounding percentage, but can they guard inside? And the other thing is, I'm not sure they have guards. If Indiana's really playing great defense, I don't know that they can really break us down. And I know the teams we've played have not been great teams, but there's been some quickness on the perimeter. And I think that I don't think a lot of quickness. Maybe it's deceiving with Wisconsin, and they can break people down. But that swing offense is meant to get an advantage in the post, and I'm not sure they can post other people against the guys that we're running in. And in the past, you might be able to post a Davidson against a smaller guard. And I just think that those two things, the 3-point line, and then can we take advantage of getting that ball inside and pushing the ball in transition? I think we're the more athletic team, and you got to take advantage of that with pace on offense to have more possessions in this game than let them slow it down in that swing. And I haven't looked at Ken Palm's pace numbers or anything like that, but that would be
they're slow. I mean, they're among the slowest. Is it possible that this could be a game where if Deron Davis has anything to give, that he could come through here? I mean, this to me is the game that I've been games like this, or where I've been thinking about, Duran, as I've been talking about, Duran's going to help win us some games. Games like this seem to be the ones, where they don't have a lot of depth down low. It's a slower paced game. It seems like if there's any type of game style that he's going to be able to play in, it would be this one. So I'm going to be pretty concerned if he doesn't get in at all and can't make an impact in this game.
I think the pace issue I agree with, but Reavers pops out for threes and he likes to shot fake and drive from the perimeter. And they run that swing where you just back screen people through and then step out, and anybody can be in that low post. They can bring Duran out on the floor.
Yeah, and looking at this, Reavers is taking, I'm doing rough math in my head, so that's dangerous, but probably about 30% of his shots have come from three-point range, and they don't really play anybody else. If you look at these minutes numbers, they have one guy over 6'8" who's actually played any minutes, and it's a freshman who's played 3.4% of minutes. So if you wanted to bring him in, you better give him the ball every time and just punish the hell out of them.
That's what I mean. Only for like 10, 12 minutes, I
don't even know if you do it that much, but if you could do that to get Reavers in foul trouble, maybe you could continue to do that. But I think he's going to struggle defensively in that kind of matchup because there's not a clear guy that he would line up against. But it'll be interesting.
Look, I'll just stop trying to make this happen. Okay, I will stop
shoehorning it in. It's fine. Do what you need to do.
I think your foul situation is good too because that's illegal to call fouls at the Kohl Center, and that's just been one of the strengths. Ethan Happ will be traveling all day, and they'll still won't call it, and he's not even playing. But I do think that's one of Indiana's strengths, and if they're not going to get calls, and I think I saw in the chat room that they only North Carolina State only went to the foul line 10 or so times in that game, so they just don't foul as well as getting homer calls.
Yeah. All righty. Well, coming up, we're going to talk some Big Ten hoops. Have our expectations for the conference changed based on the first month of play? And also, we go on the record with some statistical predictions in this week's Mediocre Question of the Week. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. That's all next.
This is Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the Assembly Call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Thanks, Ethan. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com, and if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch those replays and see all of the between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Guys, let's talk about the Big Ten, because it has been an interesting first few weeks. I think a lot of people were nervous after the opening week of the season. Big Ten, kind of took some losses, didn't look that great. It's like, all right, all the naysayers from the offseason, they were right. And now, Andy, a few weeks later, Big Ten wins the Big Ten ACC Challenge, do a pretty good job in the Gavitt games. You look up, and the Big Ten's got 4 teams in the top 7, 5 in the top 13. Things are looking pretty good, and we'll get to what all of that means from a strength of schedule, from a potential bracketology perspective here in a little bit. But I'm just curious, what are your expectations now for the Big Ten? Because coming into the season, it was pretty much unanimous. Like, okay, there's Michigan State in a tier by themselves, and then Ohio State, Maryland below them, and then you kind of get to some other teams. Have your feelings on that changed? Like, are you now putting Ohio State and Maryland up with Michigan State? Anybody else? Or are you not going to react that strongly to the first month?
I've been really impressed with Ohio State. I think like a lot of people, are keeping Maryland at arm's length because of the Turgeon factor. But Ohio State, a little bit of one of North Carolina's big guys goes down pretty early in that game. I think that's a factor. I don't know that explains. Cole Anthony went out for a little bit too. I don't know that explains, winning that alone is why you win by 25 at North Carolina. I think they've been really impressive. They blew the doors off of Villanova, already beat Cincinnati, who's not as good as they've been this year. So if there's one that I would elevate and say, if somebody else is going to win the league, Ohio State would be who I would pick based on what I've seen thus far. Michigan State has been disappointing, and by the same, I would struggle to pin all that on not having Josh Langford. There's more to it than that, it seems like, even though it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. So I think they'll still be there when it's all said and done. And I do think those are probably still the top 3 teams, but I think the level of separation between them is different. And I think some of the teams behind them have potentially started to separate. Everybody, to your point, had those 3 at the top, and then it was 4 through 11 were pretty jumbled up. I think you're starting to see a little bit of that separation where that larger group may be separating into a couple teams. And I do think some of the questions that people had about the league have been answered in the affirmative, like Michigan. And there was a lot of questions about what they were going to look like with Juwan Howard. They didn't play well at Louisville, but I think in general, you've seen enough to say they're not going to fall off the map entirely. That's been positive. Purdue had a really, really strong performance against Virginia. They've had some close losses to good competition. So despite the fact that they've got 3 losses, I don't know that that's damning by any means. So I don't think they're certainly not going to be as good as they were a year ago, but I think the quality is still there. And, Penn State's been relatively impressive. They could very easily be undefeated. They blew a big lead to Ole Miss in the NIT. And so I think that there's a lot of teams up there at the top that I think might be a little bit better than people expected.
Coach, I think I saw you guys release a new bracket, right, for Delphi Bracketology?
Yeah, you got to take those with a grain of salt. We kind of just talked the other day and looked at schedules and KenPom and threw something together.
But still, I'm just curious, like how many Big Ten teams were in there? Has that changed from what was there in the preseason? Yeah, and where do you kind of see Indiana fitting in right now?
We had 7 in this bracket and considered 2 others. So I think there's 9, 10 that are still obviously having chances of making it in. I think, and that was somewhat similar to what we started with. I think we had Indiana at 7, and now we moved them up to the 5th team in the conference to get in because of their KenPom numbers and their top 17 win. So we put them at 22 on the seed list, which is a 6th seed. Gary Parrish had him 17th and his top 25-1. It's way too early to get excited about any of that. But I think the Big Ten has 4 really solid teams. You put Michigan up there in those 3. I think you have to, even though sometimes winning in a 3-day tournament, there's some nuances there to, Gonzaga being hurt and playing their 3rd game in 3 days and no scouting report and some of those things. So the wins are important and big for Michigan, but you also got to take that a little bit. But I think Michigan's for real. They're veteran guys, and I think Coach Howard's doing a nice job so far. And then I think you have 4 teams that are really going to fight for that next level, and that's Indiana, Purdue, Iowa, and Penn State. And the top 2 are definitely probably going to be in, and the other 2 are going to be sweating it out. And I think the potential maybe with the league being good of getting 8 teams in. And then you have Wisconsin and Illinois teams that are capable of moving up that so far have just kind of hung out in that middle a little bit. So I'd say 7 definitely at this point. But if the Big Ten keeps winning in the non-conference and then a lot of quality wins, you could see them with the most teams in the tournament.
Sure feel better about it now than I did a few weeks ago. And we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the mailbag because there's a good question about this, just in terms of strength of schedule and how this will impact what happens in Big Ten play. But we want to get to our mediocre question of the week. This is from our buddy Jay Horry. And we went on the record with some season-long predictions earlier in the year, and he wants us to go on record with some Big Ten only, some conference-only predictions. So he said these will be added to the preseason predictions. Andy, you will be happy to know that you are currently leading the preseason predictions with 11 correct out of 14. Coach, Ryan, and I all have 10 correct. So congratulations, Andy, on your honor.
Good job, Andy.
Yes.
It's still early.
But it is. Okay, so these are only for the 20 Big Ten games, so keep that in mind. So here we go. 3-point percentage. Do you think Indiana will finish over or under 34.5%? For context, we're currently shooting 36.1%. Last season, in conference games, Indiana shot 27.5% from three-point range. Every time I see that, it's a typo, and then I remember how awful it was watching the shooting. And I remember it's not a typo. It happened. Coach, what do you think? Over, under 34.5% from 3?
I think we'll be slightly over, and that's probably more wishful thinking than anything. But I'm going to take the over.
I'm going over for sure. I think for the most part, the guys who should be shooting threes are the ones shooting threes. So this has nothing to do with volume. It's all about efficiency, and I think we'll be an efficient 3-point shooting team in Big Ten play. Andy?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good line. When you look down what they've done in games over the course of the year, it's been fairly sporadic: 45%, 21, 38, 39, 30, 32, 35, and 47. So it's been a little bit all over the map, but I'll go over as well. I think maybe they end up at 35. I don't think they blow that number out of the water, and it probably comes down a little bit from what it is now, but I don't. Again, I'm kind of like Coach. I'm hopefully this isn't just wish casting, but if it works, who cares?
We need like degrees of over. Like I'm strongly over, and you guys are very meekly, very, very
true,
very, very weakly over. Okay, number 2, Trace Jackson Davis doubles. The over under at 7.5. Now this season he already has 4 of them. And for context, last year, Juwan had 4 in Big Ten play, although he did have several games where he got the rebounding part of it and then only had like 8 or 9 points, and a few of those were injury shortened. But what do you think? Trace Jackson Davis, over under 7.5 double-doubles, Andy?
I'm going to say under. I just think that's going to be, as the physicality gets a little bit more, I feel like it's going to be more difficult. And you could see even against Florida State, he ends up with 8. He played a great game and had 8. Only 3 of those on the defensive end. So if the offensive rebounding is probably what really swings that one way or the other. So I'll take under, but I could see him getting 6 or 7.
My gut instinct is to say under 2, but I'm going to go against it and say over. Not just to be different, but more just as kind of like a peace offering to Trace for doubting the impact that he would have in the offseason. I'm going to go with him now.
I'm sure that's going to mean a lot to him. So that's really, really important.
It's more for me than it is for him. I get that. But I'm going over. I'm going to believe in him. I think you make some very rational points there, Andy, and I think that's probably more likely. But, man, he's talented. And I think he's going to get the minutes because, I mean, every lineup that you want to make, you put him in there. So I'm gonna trust his talent. I'm going to trust the minutes and say that he goes over. Coach?
I'm going to take the under, meekly take the under. He finishes with 7.
Another meek under. Okay. Let's see. Next one. Did you want to say something, Coach?
No, I'll wait.
Okay. Okay. Technical fouls from Mike Roberts. Over under 1.5.
Who cares? Give me over and under. I don't care. As long as he keeps going crazy.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Damezi Anderson minutes. Over under 10 minutes per game. This year, he's already averaging 15.1 minutes per game. Coach, why don't you go first on this one?
I think he's going to go over. The growth that he's shown defensively gets him more minutes because Indiana can definitely use his shooters. As Wisconsin's planning on sagging in this weekend, there's a guy who can extend the floor a little bit, and if he can guard, I think you're going to see more than 10 minutes in Big Ten play. Would
have been interesting to get this question before the last game against Florida State, but I think he showed a lot in that game. He really did, and so I'm going over too. I think we've all kind of been high on him in the offseason just based on what we heard about his work ethic and all those things, and it's starting to bear fruit, and you're starting to really see it in improved play. So I'm over. Andy, are you believing in Damezi?
This is definitely impeccable timing on Jay's part for this question to come in now. But I will also take the over. I'd go back to, he was one of the guys I led with after the game, just really what lift he gave. And we've talked about this a little bit with the lineup stuff where Archie finds somebody, a group that he likes, something that goes the way that he wants it to and really sticks with it. I think to him, a performance like what Damezi came in when they really needed him and played as hard as he did, played as well as he did defensively, carries a lot of weight in Archie's eyes. So I think it earned him a little bit of rope and chances more playing time.
Yeah. Free throw attempts, over under 25 per game. We're currently at 30 per game. So over under 25 per game, Andy.
I got to try to figure out how many we're going to have to get in the other 19 games after we shoot 4 on Saturday. So you're going to have to give me a minute to do the math on that. I'm going to say under. I feel like in a lot of these early games, there's different points of emphasis and guys get stuck into calling fouls. And then eventually by mid-January, Big Ten teams have broken out the steel chairs and are taking those to each other and going at it that way. So I think I'm going to say under. I think it would be a great sign for the team if it ended up over, that you could go into some of these road environments and still do that. But I'll say under.
Yeah, I would have liked to do some research on this and just kind of seen where the numbers ended up the last few years for some context. I didn't do that, so saying under seems to make the most sense to me too, for exactly the reasons that you stated.
You
Coach,
did the same amount of research I did, so good.
Yeah. Coach, would you like to meekly answer this one way or the other?
Yeah, I'm going to meekly say it's mediocre night, meekly night. I like Jay, so I'll just give a mediocre answer and say I'm going to go over. I think it's an emphasis on this team. I think that the pace is going to pick up even more when Rob gets back and can push the ball as a point guard. And I just think I need to differentiate and maybe get a sneak out a win.
Okay.
In this category.
All right. Okay, next one. How many times will Ryan complain about how late he has to be up, even though he's on the Pacific time zone? Over under 7.5.
Over.
Yeah.
Okay, that was easy.
I always take the over with Ryan complaints. That's it's a good rule of thumb.
Good call. Okay, threes made by Devonte Green. Over under 2.5 per game. He's currently at 2.8 made threes per game in 5 games, and he is shooting a scorching 51.9%. Coach, you are not allowed to give meek answers about Devonte Green. It's got to be all or nothing. Let's go. There's nothing meek about Devonte Green.
Over. He's going to be first team, second team, Big Ten. I made that a few shows back. He's got to hit more than 2.5 per game. And if Oladipo shows up, the over under 6, I think, or 5 or whatever he hit the other night when Victor's in the crowd.
I'm going over too. I think he's going to get the attempts. I think he's always been a more efficient shooter than people have given him credit for. His shooting has been pretty consistent and efficient for the most part overall. It's obviously some of the other decisions he makes that haven't been good, but yeah, I'm going over. Andy?
Yeah, over for me too.
Okay, that one was
another well-timed one, but I'll take the over on that regardless.
Yeah, I know Jay's really like all of these that we're really feeling good about right now. These were very, very, very appropriately chosen. Jay, Justin Smith stocks. He made a new stat here. Steals plus blocks. The over-under is at 2.2 per game. Currently, Justin is at 2.3 per game. As a sophomore, it was 1. As a freshman, it was 0.5. Those numbers seem insane given his athleticism, but it does show you how much more disruptive of a defender he is being this year. And obviously, he's playing some more minutes too, but you can all see just how much more impactful he is on that end. So, Coach, 2.3 per game. You going over or under?
Man, as the season gets tougher to Big Ten, I'm going to go over. I just think he's been locked in for the most part, and he's been called out as being the best defender, and I think those numbers might stay consistent because of that.
Yeah, I'm going to go over too. He's getting a lot more steals than he is blocks right now, and part of that's probably just because Trace is gobbling up all the blocks, but I feel like that number will go up a little bit. And I like the way that he's approaching these games. And again, I think he's going to keep getting minutes if he's playing like this. So I'm going over. Andy?
That's boy. I'm going to say under, because I don't know that the blocks change a whole lot, and there aren't too many guys who are averaging over 2 steals a game. I just don't know that the blocks change enough. So the steals is what's really carrying him. I was trying to do some quick research, but I was unable to do that, to see kind of what a standard number for that would be. But that feels a little high, so I'll take the under on that one.
This one's really interesting. IU players on the all Big Ten teams, first through third team. The over-under is 1.5. I feel like this one would have been really easy before the season to say under on. Now it feels a little bit trickier. Andy, are you going over under on 1.5? And this does not include honorable mention. It just says first through third team.
And it's just a true 5-man team, right? There's no extra play. It's just 5 guys per first, second, third. So we're talking top 15 players.
Yep.
Yeah, Big Ten doesn't do some of the same nonsense that that some of the other leagues do, where they have 11 guys or whatever ridiculous things they have.
Yeah.
Man, this is another well-timed one, because you just feel like I think if it's anybody, if it's going to be over, it'd have to be Devonte and Trace, is what it feels like. So
yes,
that's ultimately the question that you're asking here. I'm going to say, why not be a prisoner of the moment? I'll say over, but I would be a smarter person if I actually went through and tried to go through and figure out who these people would be. But I did not do that ahead of time, and why do it now? So I'll climb on board and say over.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of play the odds, and I feel like that's under, with one of those making it and then one of those guys maybe getting honorable mention, just because there's a lot of other good players in the conference having good seasons. So they could be deserving, but it's just it becomes a numbers game as well. So look, if they do, that means Indiana had an amazing season. So I hope it happens, but I'm gonna take the safe answer and go under and hope to be wrong. Coach?
I'm going over. Tired of meek answers.
Okay. You've really done a 180.
You really goaded him into.
I called Devonte, and I think Trace Jackson Davis, and I think if Indiana moves up into the top 5 or 6 in the league when they were forecast for 8th or 9th, you're almost going to see. The problem with going over is there's a lot of great players in the Big Ten, and you got Michigan with 3 solid guys coming back, Ohio State, some of those top teams with some players there. The bottom guys, I don't think Nebraska's going to get anybody on the top 3. But so it'll be interesting. But if Indiana really achieves where they're kind of headed to, we might have a chance of getting 2.
All right, let's hit this last one quickly. Conference wins, over under 11.5. The current KenPom conference record prediction is 11-9, Andy. But interestingly, only 7 of the games are predicted with a loss. So obviously, if you know KenPom, you know that does the individual games, and that often doesn't add up. It kind of takes into account that you may lose a few that you shouldn't, all that stuff. What do you think? Over, under 11.5?
This would be a good time to. This has been a good time to prepare for things. What the heck? I'll go over. I'll say they'll finish 12-8. I don't think they're going to dramatically be different one way or the other. It feels like 11-9, 12-8 when it's all said and done.
I wish Jay would have given us how many games Rob is going to play in here. That would have been really helpful in figuring out this answer. I'm going to go over 2 because I feel like ending this on a high note. I think you could argue it either way. So I'm gonna just err on the side of optimism.
I'm going to go over. Looking at the schedule today, I was hoping to go get 8 wins at home and 4 on the road, and that puts you at 12. And really, if you can protect home court, that's 10 and sneak out a couple. So I think the way we're headed, a 12-8 record would be, or better would be, right around the corner for us. I really believe in this team.
All right, good stuff, Jay. Thanks as always for that question. Always fun to go through those, and we look forward to seeing who wins at the end of the year. And we got to make sure Ryan goes on the record with those too. All right, coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions like we always do, including one about whether Devonte might be best suited coming off the bench, and how the Big Ten winning the Big Ten ACC Challenge might affect IU's strength of schedule moving forward, plus many others. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
Hi, this is James Blackman Jr. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, James. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the Coach Brian Tonsoni. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU News Roundup even during the offseason, and after every game we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, guys, we have a loaded mailbag. All of these questions were submitted in our private IU basketball discussion community, assemblycall.com/community. If you're listening on the radio and you want to hear the rest of the answers, we won't be able to get to all of them. You can go to our website, check out the podcast where we'll do them at the end of the show. But let's hit this one. This is something that a lot of people have been asking after his sterling performance off the bench against Florida State from Patrick. I think Devonte not starting is a great match for his personality and gives the coaches a chance to point out to him where they want him to attack. Do you think he will eventually be moved into the starting lineup? Coach, we know some guys are kind of better suited to being that guy off the bench. To me, I think in an ideal world on an ideal team, Devonte probably is like your first guard off the bench providing that spark. That's not really what we projected for him this season, given the roster. But do you think he could eventually settle into that, or do you think he'll get back into the starting lineup?
Well, Devonte, I think, ended up playing 29 minutes. So he got starter minutes, even though he didn't play. And as long as he's okay with that, I could see him coming off the bench. And it might be that he gets the game flow. He gets to see what the other team's doing and where to attack and how to attack. And that keeps him more focused. And we see more good than bad. However, I think you got to play your best guys to get off to a good start. Indiana was down 11-4. I think a couple more bad starts, and I really think, Archie said he was hobbled after the game, so I still think he's limited in practice, and I think Archie's given the guys who go full go in practice a chance to start, knowing that he'll play Devonte and Rob as much as possible, and when they get fully healthy, I think that's when the question really will be answered.
Did it look like he tweaked his ankle a little bit at the end of the Florida State game on like one of those final plays? Hopefully that's nothing to worry about. I mean, he stayed out there and was moving around, so hopefully not. But, hey, we'd be forgiven if we over-worry about injuries a little bit with how things have gone. Okay, this question from Rob, and it kind of dovetails with what we were talking about earlier. ACC Big Ten Challenge, Big Ten 8-6 with some great wins. How do you think this will affect the strength of schedule for IU and conference games, Andy? And maybe you can talk about how, the conference doing well like this, it's really going to help all the teams in the conference have more opportunities for quality wins as we go through the season.
Yeah, it's definitely a rising tide lifts all boats scenario when the conference plays well. And I put together something the other day. I tried to update it before we got on here, so I may be off a game or two here and there. But basically looking at the 6 major conferences, how they've fared against one another. And in the aggregate, the Big Ten has the most wins at 22 in head-to-head games. Part of that is a function of playing in both the Gavitt games and the Big Ten ACC, so they have had more opportunities than others. But even from a win percentage standpoint, they're at about 54%. The Big East is the only team that's better, which is at 57%. But the Big Ten has a 7-4 record over the Big East. So all of those things are positives in the sense that it gives those teams a good base, allows them to ideally perform well in the metrics, because that's really a bigger factor in the net. Some of the advanced metrics and things like that, you're obviously winning games if you're doing relatively well in those. So does give a good chance. Ideally pushes everybody up a little bit, and as much as it gives you a lot of chances for good wins, it also minimizes the chances for bad losses, which will certainly be held against you. And IU's managed to dodge those in the early season, as Coach mentioned earlier, in cases where other teams haven't been able to do. So it definitely is a positive. There's a handful of bigger games left for conference teams, but not a ton. So they've done a pretty good job of setting a good floor for where they're going to be and performing well against other conferences compared to some others that are below 500 against other major conferences.
Coach, like you and I were talking about before the show, it's almost like the conferences spend their time in this non-conference, kind of jockeying for position. And it's like, okay, the Big Ten's got 5 teams in the top 15 in KenPom. As the Big Ten teams, your conference teams now beat each other, it's like one might move down, but another might move up. So it's like, the net effect kind of stays the same. And that's why these wins are so important, to improve that conference profile now, because there's not as much of a chance to do it later.
Yeah, because then every game in conference is worth something, and the losses aren't as bad as well if you only have 3 or 4. Like the Pac-12 last year really struggled because they just, no matter who they were playing, they really couldn't find some quality wins to add to their resume come selection time. So it's kind of hard to root for some of these Big Ten teams in these non-conference games, but it does pay off when you win the Gavitt games and you win the ACC Challenge and you get some good non-conference wins.
Okay. This will be the last question we can get to. We got about 30 seconds here. Andy, who has impressed you more? This is from Craig. Armaan and his ability to step into the starting role and perform this well, or Damezi and his growth, especially on the defensive end? It's like making us choose between our children. Like, why?
I know.
Why make us make this determination?
I would actually lean Damezi because I feel like he's improved a lot even within the year. He struggled really a lot at the beginning of the season. I think we've even seen game-to-game improvement already from him. So I'd lean him.
Coach, 5 seconds. What's your answer?
Damezi with his defensive improvement, easily.
All right, that's going to have to do it for us on this week's episode of The Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing much of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We will talk to you Saturday after IU Wisconsin. Until then.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you. Okay, so I will answer that question as well. I like your guys' answers, but I'm gonna go with Armaan. I don't want to penalize Armaan simply because he kind of came in more ready to go as a freshman. Like, Damezi kind of had further to go, so he has certainly probably improved the most. But I think it's really impressive how much Armaan has been asked to handle. And for the most part, how well he's handled it. Kind of felt like he hit a little bit of a lull there, games 5, 6, 7. But man, he was impressive in that Florida State game in the biggest moment of the season. And he's had to step in and play more minutes than anybody thought. And there's just a maturity about him that I think is really impressive. So, I love the baseline that he's starting from because we know from his mentality, his track record, and his work ethic that he's just going to keep improving. So I'm really impressed with Armaan.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think there's a bad answer to that question. Good problem to have that you have two guys who have outperformed what you thought they would do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, from Jim, which Wisconsin players concern you the most in Saturday's game? We hit on this a little bit in the opening one, but Reavers is obviously the guy that is kind of their go-to guy. I'm more concerned with Trice and Davison going off from 3 and our guards being a little late getting out to them. That to me is how Indiana will lose this game. What do you think, Coach?
Davidson, he's a guy you don't like to play against when you're the opponent, but if he's on your team, you like him. Despite the millions of flops that he's going to do. I think that kid just likes to win. He's played through injuries in the past. So I hate to say it, that's my type of guy. I just hope he has an off night and continues to struggle from 3. But that's the guy who worries me because I think he's a gamer, and if he can find it, he can put a team on his shoulders, hit some crazy shots, and it seems like IU always brings out some of those in some of these games.
What are the chances of him getting a flopping warning inside the Kohl Center?
None.
One out of a million?
Yeah, not very good. But
not good.
I think all joking aside about the flopping, I mean, given IU's lack of guard depth, he baits somebody into a charge or an offensive foul or two. Things could get interesting in that regard. They're not going to punish you with that from a pressing standpoint, but taking some of those guys off the floor would be big. So only takes a couple of those kind of plays to do it. So he would be my answer as well. Although there's always like the more obscure guy who would come in and do well. So maybe Pritzl shoots really well or something like that. I forget what the one dude's name was who went off in the Big Ten tournament who scored more points in that game than he had the entire season or whatever.
God,
Rob Wilson, I want to say was his name, something like that.
Yeah, it was something like that.
I don't know.
God, that game was brutal. What was the most impressive win by a Big Ten team in the Big Ten ACC Challenge? I mean, I think it's got to be Ohio State.
I would almost say Purdue. The way that they were able to get, I would say it more, not their defensive performance was certainly good, but I think Virginia's still trying to figure a lot out offensively. They didn't have Braxton Key, but I thought for anybody to be able to score as well on Virginia as Purdue did, even with, they did it last year when they were a lot more talented offensively, but to be able to figure that out. So I would tend to say them, although Ohio State was potentially more impressive because it was on the road.
Yeah.
I mean, Penn State really blew the doors off of Wake Forest though. So that can't go unnoticed. Just kidding.
No,
totally kidding.
I think Harms is largely a stiff.
Did he make 2 3-pointers in that game? I think I saw.
Yeah, I saw him make one, and then they flashed something up that he had made like both of his 3-point attempts. So,
all right, well, we might have to retire that drop. Maybe Matt Harms is developing some skill out there.
I don't know.
Maybe
he needs to develop some cheers or something, man. When he gets excited, that's just not. It just doesn't look right. A little. All this stuff and everything. I mean, come on, be an athlete. If you're going to pop your collar like a man. Let's go. My gosh, guy drive. I think, hey, I tell you what, when I've covered those games and he's in the media and I'm in the media room, there's no one better, I hate to say it, than Matt Harms, the way he answers honestly, and he's just a solid young man. So I
agree with that.
Really teasing, but
I agree with that. I was reading Dustin Dopirac's article about the Virginia game, and they had a bunch of quotes in there from Harms. And I actually thought to myself, I was like, if we had a player saying this kind of stuff, we'd be all over it. I mean, it was just, this is just one game. We've got to really, make sure that this is the start of something, or else it's not going to be, it's not going to be meaningful. So we give Harms a hard time, and rightfully so. But I have grown to respect him the more I've gotten to know about him. Okay, you do the next question. I got to go wash my mouth out with soap after
light myself on fire. Now that we said that, good.
I'm done. I'm back to being meek.
Yeah. If we win on Saturday, where will IU be ranked?
Anybody? Come on, Andy.
I don't know. 18.
That'd be quite a jump, but a lot of the the people who do their daily rankings, like Parrish, and I think Norlander had Indiana maybe 11th when he did his. Yeah. So there's Indiana's jumping up on some of these.
Here's the truth about a lot of people who look at everyone jumps to bigger conclusions than what that was a nice win for Indiana. I do think they're pushing the top 25. A win at Wisconsin would be really good. They still got some things to prove and some things to work on. So I don't see them jumping up to the top 10 just because they beat Florida State and a 4-4 Wisconsin team on the road. But I do think they deserve some recognition. I would say, 20 to 25 with still some wait and see and get Rob back and be consistent, and remember they were 12-2 last year before the wheels fell off. So it's going to be a long, slow season of just caution and patience for a lot of us. But I do think they might get some recognition and pop in the top 25 with the win on Saturday.
Yeah, I think if people are really waiting to see if it was a mirage what they were doing or not, beating an ACC team at home by 16 and winning a game away from home, I think would help. So maybe 18 was a little bit much. Maybe 20 is really the ceiling for that, given where they started. But
good point from Aaron in the chat. He said Michigan jumped from unranked to 4 in a week, so 15 to 20 would not be unprecedented.
Yeah,
good point.
And everyone then picked Michigan to beat Louisville because Louisville hasn't played anybody. Michigan beat 3 teams in the Atlantis, in a ballroom 3 days in a row, and Michigan got waxed. So now everyone's going to be down on Michigan. That's just how it goes. Stephen A. Whatever happens is what's going to happen next, and there's no thought process to some of these people.
Can we get 30 seconds on playing basketball in a ballroom and your thoughts on that?
Man, they gotta cross the hallway to go to the locker room. That's not basketball. Basketball is supposed to be played at the Palestra, at Assembly Hall, at Pauley Pavilion. Those are basketball places, not some ballroom.
I agree.
How about that? That's 15 seconds.
It's good stuff. From IUDSW, why does Race not play in the second halves of games? This is an interesting question. I don't know that we've seen enough close games yet really to know this. I think, I don't think Race has played as well the last few games. So I think that's part of the reason. Archie has proven that he's going to give guys a chance to play in the first half. And then the guys that are playing the best, that rotation is getting shortened in the second half. You better have done something in the first half, or you better really do something when you get in the second half, or he's not going to waste time with it, which I really like and really appreciate. And I just think Race hasn't been quite as impactful of late. And in the Florida State game, you weren't going to take Trace off the floor. You weren't going to take Justin Smith off the floor. And Damezi was the most impactful of the bench forwards that came in, and Archie's going to roll with those guys. So I think there will be a game, and it might come Saturday, where Race is that guy and plays 10 minutes in the second half. I just think right now it's a small sample size, and, he's, again, hasn't played a ton of minutes at the college level and going through some ups and downs. So I don't think it's anything more than that.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
Yep, I didn't read anything more into it than that either. And I think as you start to play, most of the teams IU's played right now don't have a ton of big guys, so it's easy to revert a bit to playing Justin at the 3 if you need to, or playing a smaller lineup alongside he and Trace. And so there will certainly be times. I'm not even sure that this weekend will be one of them, given Wisconsin's relative lack of size. But you could certainly. That was who he played really well against last year. So who knows?
There was some discussion in the chat room a few shows back about minutes distribution, and then I played around with it. It's not easy to think about minutes distribution, and you want your better players to play close to 30. And some of them,
Trace and Justin are making it hard.
And that's the point you made, which I think was really good. That if some players are playing good, Archie's not going to take him out just to get minutes. There's not a structured minutes. If there is, it might be in the first half, but he's going to play the players who are going to give Indiana the best chance to win. And so it's going to be interesting to see. Those guys are averaging 13 to 15 minutes a game. That's just 6 minutes a half. Maybe you get 8 or 9 in the first half and then only 3 or 4. But I agree with you. I like it.
It makes guys have to work hard. Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody's going to shy away from that, it's not really a guy that we want in the program. That's not a long-term fit. So I know I like it. It's nice that Archie has options, and it's nice that he's got some horses out front in that starting lineup, really setting the pace. Credit to Justin and Trace, because they're really doing that. They're going to make it hard to take him off the floor. Let's see. Same old questions about Rob and Duran. I'm assuming that's health stuff. I don't know. Apparently Rob practiced before the last game. You all know this. Then he sprained his ankle. I'm not assuming he's going to play Saturday if he if he hurt his ankle. I don't know. Maybe, Joel's been out there scouting when he, enters cook hall, when he leaves cook hall. So maybe Joel can tell us how he's walking. But I'm just going to assume he's not going to play in this game, and then be pleasantly surprised if he does. We talked about Duran already. We'll see. I don't know what to expect there. What does the Florida State win do for recruiting? I don't think that win itself does anything for recruiting. I think it can be a springboard to a successful season, which would then do something for recruiting. But I don't think that win in and of itself does anything in particular for recruiting.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody was there. I think it's a case where the only thing that game in and of itself does is if you get somebody in the building when it's rocking like that, might have an impact on somebody. But I don't know that I saw reports of people really being there. So,
yeah.
The only thing is you win in the ACC Challenge. That's a big win. That's going to be bigger than beating Arkansas, and I think that might get a recruit's attention more than beating someone like that because the ACC Challenge week. So,
except for the fact that it got it was big to us, but when you have Duke beating Michigan State and Ohio State doing what they did, our win did get lost in the shuffle a little bit in terms of profile.
But if a recruit's watching Indiana and wants to see them win, that's the first. That's a big first step. Where they can absorb a loss now, because you lose that, and there's some doubt that creeps in until you get that next big one. And I don't know that next big one's till Maryland.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mean. It's a good step, a good first step. Joel said he's been walking gingerly, an obvious limp. So just get well, Rob. Get healthy, man. Okay, last two from Luke. Most of the questions about the current team have already been asked. Oh, so I'll go with a fun one. Oh, yeah, this is a fun one. Would you rather have IU make every NCAA tournament from now on out and never make it past the Sweet 16? Or would you rather IU make it once every 5 years, but we would make it to the championship game every time? It's impossible to fathom a program that would be that inconsistent, but then make the championship every time you did make it. So it's an absurd question, but, some of these questions at the extremes are fun because it shows what you value. So, Coach, never make it past the Sweet 16, but you're in the tournament. If you knew that, it would really take the fun away from it. So, it would kind of depend on how much you knew.
No offense, Luke. It's just a tough question. You want to be in a tournament. There's just something seeing your name called on Selection Sunday, seeing the matchups, taking time off work, or watching at work, or whatever you have to do to get the game watched. It's I don't know, these 3 years without it, I could not see 4 years, even if you went to the championship game, although that.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It depends on the information that you have. If I know we're not going to make the Sweet 16 or get past it, then making the tournament has a little bit less luster. And we're about banners, so give me the chance to make it to the championship game. If you can tweak the question a little bit differently, I could see going with the other one. But given how this question was asked, I'm going with make it every 5 years, but make it to the championship.
Yeah, I would say that as well. Like you said, based on what it would depend on what you knew, but I can imagine all the kinds of questions that we would get if IU made it to the tournament and never got past the Sweet 16 every year. That would be a delightful experience.
Yeah, what would that be like?
I like Luke. I'm not sure I like that question.
Oh, okay. Wow, Coach coming in hard with the audience criticism here late in the show.
I like Luke. That's just too tough a question for a Thursday night.
Okay. Yeah, Luke, come on, man. If you're going to pop your collar, do it like a man or whatever. Okay, last question from Bill. What pieces of the team that don't jump out, unlike needing Devonte Green playing up to his potential, which is obvious, do you think will really matter the most when we get into the heart of the Big Ten schedule? In other words, what don't we think about that we ought to be thinking about that will really help define this season's success? He says, I'll give you one to start with. Armaan Franklin is going to have to give us 20 largely quality minutes per game all season long. I attribute that to Coach being particularly adept at gearing his guards up for extended play because he installs his style of play in his guards, i.e. his recruits. So what is kind of a, I guess like an underrated storyline that we haven't talked about a lot that is going to be really important for Indiana's success? Andy.
Thanks for throwing this to me first. It's really nice to be.
Andy likes Bill, but he doesn't like this question.
It's not even the question. It's the order in which the question was asked. That is a good question. The Armaan one it becomes interesting. I'm going to go similar in the backcourt and make it a little bit more about Al.
That's where I was going to go with it too. Maybe
this is again in the same way that we were maybe prisoners of the moment in a positive way before. They need him to be. I don't know that I would go so far as to say they need him to be what he was in some of those early games when he was scoring, 21, 18, 17 points. But there's also 3 games that he scored 6 or fewer out of the games that have been played so far. So I think it's getting. Maybe it's just 10 a game, somewhere in the middle of those performances, but knowing that that's what you're going to get from him on a night in and night out basis, and him being able to continue to shoulder more of the load, because to tie that in with the Rob stuff, which really is where the Armaan piece that Bill brought up comes into play, is if you get yourself in a situation where he's not available or not 100%, or all the things that we've kind of seen from him thus far, the amount that you need from Al and from Armaan becomes bigger than anybody thought it would be at the beginning of the season. And right now we're harboring these thoughts that Rob is going to come back at some point and be at a certain level, and we don't know that. And if that doesn't happen, it really puts the onus on a guy like Al to be a consistent night in, night out contributor from a point standpoint. And I think the same thing with Armaan. So I guess I'll say that.
Breaking news. Louisiana Tech has defeated Mississippi State at Mississippi State. Solid win for a team on Indiana's schedule. I was going to go at the same place you did, Andy, with Al. I think Al, we talked about this on the postgame show, really struggled in the second half. Struggled at times in the first half too, but his teammates picked him up. Devonte and Armaan really picked up Al offensively, and it made his almost complete lack of production in the second half. And it wasn't just a lack of production, it was a real lack of willingness to confront the Florida State pressure and be adamantly aggressive, which I think he has to be offensively for this team. There's going to be games where Devontae's not going to score 30 and Armaan's going to play more like a freshman and Al's going to have to be that guy. I think one of those is going to be Saturday. So that to me is a storyline. Worried about it before the season just because of Al's track record a little bit. And it's going to be interesting to see as we start playing more physical teams if he's able to find more consistency than he has. Because, as you said, until Rob gets back, he has to. So that to me is something that's really going to be worth watching. Coach.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna throw another one out there too. Is production from the bench in the post. All freshmen sometimes hit a wall. We've been very impressed with Trace Jackson Davis. He's getting major minutes, but if he gets stopped or the defenses go there, Joey's had some nice games, but he's struggled at times defensively. Duran hasn't been able to get out there yet, and we just talked about Race. His minutes getting limited because other players are playing well. What happens when those front court guys struggle? Damezi has stepped up. Armaan has stepped up at the guards for an injured Rob. Who's that guy that's going to step up in the post should we need it if Justin, TJD come back, regress a little bit to the mean? Because we need better production, I think, from those three. Brunk has been nice, but Duran hasn't done much, and Race has been competitive and a good rebounder, but he's going to have to do more too. Which one of those is really going to pick up the slack when it gets tough for the post players?
Yeah, the other one that I would say is just Jerome Hunter's development. It's been easy the last few games to overlook. Like it was such a novelty when he first came back. It's like every single move he made was hyper analyzed, and he hasn't been as productive recently and hasn't been able to get in the flow of the game. Unfortunately, other guys have. But I think of all those guys on the bench, the one that has the potential to change the ceiling of this team is Jerome Hunter, if he can really develop over the next couple months. So I think watching him and seeing if he can take some small steps toward getting comfortable offensively would really be huge for this team, just because of his talent level. And maybe it doesn't happen this season, but that's a development that could really, really impact this team. Because if he starts playing the way that he was playing last year in practice before he got hurt, and like he projected as a recruit, it's going to be real hard to keep him off the floor. Right now, it's been easy to keep him off the floor, but that to me is something that I'm going to keep watching each game, even as the minutes are a little bit smaller. Does he start to show some signs of getting there?
Indiana's 20 and Ken Palm 8-0, and Rob hasn't played very much, and he's not only a great distributor, but he can score a little bit, and then he can defend. He's our best perimeter defender, and you got a bench player in Jerome who hasn't even touched his potential yet, and he has the ability to put the ball in the basket, and both of those guys are going to be needed as defense is set up against the inside game and take away some of the inside game. So sitting at 20 and Ken Palm 8-0, and one major piece that we know about, and one piece that's still in the very much of an early development stage, depending on how soon they get back and up to speed, that could really impact this Indiana Hoosier basketball team.
Yep. All right. We exhausted all the questions. That was a loaded mailbag. Thank you all for those questions. I don't care what Joel says about them in the chat. I thought those were good questions, and we appreciated answering them. And I don't even care what Coach said. I think all the questions were good. I appreciated them all. And all
I appreciate them too. I don't want to get anyone mad, and that's tough. Sweet 16 or every 5 years. I don't know how many years I have left. I don't know how many years I have left. So, I'm getting up there in age. I got to get to the tournament. You young guys got another 40, 50 years to watch Indiana basketball.
Yeah. But at the current rate, that would be like 10 tournaments. And I need more. I need more than that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Saturday we'll be here. So Andy, you're going to be here, and I think Ryan's going to be here for that. Ryan wouldn't miss a Wisconsin postgame show.
It's a 4:30 tip-off.
Guaranteed rant about the officiating. Just know it's coming. I don't know if there's ever been an IU-Wisconsin game where Ryan's initial rant hasn't been something to do with officiating, especially at the Kohl Center.
Well,
Always.
Ethan Happ was there ever since we started the show, so we've never really seen in our 8+ years, or what?
That's not the case. The refs would have called it.
No, it's true.
That man is a liar. So we. So who knows? We'll see. Maybe we'll be singing a different tune after the game.
I hope so.
Hopefully.
I sure hope so. All right, everybody. We will talk to you on Saturday. See you guys.
Good night, all.
See you guys. Thanks.